Then go ahead, Saeed.
First, I want to ask about a colleague of mine in Gaza. He's, in fact, the bureau chief for Gaza for our newspaper and the editor-in-chief for the electronic version. His name is Mahmoud Abu Awad, Abu Mus'ab. I'll send you his name and his picture. He was taken by the Israelis on Sunday night, Sunday to Monday morning, and we lost his whereabouts. We don't know anything about him. Then there was a picture published with him stripped naked along with other men and so on. So my point is, when will the United States demand and say that this cannot keep on going with journalists that are credentialed, that have worked there for year after year, decade after decade, well known to the Israelis, Why do they keep taking them, targeting them, killing them, imprisoning them with impunity? Why is that not outrageous to you?
Saeed, when we talk about continuing to press Israel to enhance its mechanisms to better protect civilians, we of course are also talking about extending that to journalists as well. We are always concerned for the safety of journalists, especially in conflict zones, especially in somewhere like Gaza, where journalism plays a critical role. And as Secretary Blinken has said, journalists, including many Palestinians in Gaza, are doing extraordinary work under the most dangerous conditions, and we've been unequivocal here. We also have been clear and reiterated the fact that Israel needs to abide by international humanitarian law, especially as it conducts these operations, and that's something we'll continue to reiterate with them.
Well, honestly, Vedant, this slap on the wrist kind of language is not going in any way, shape, or form to sway the Israelis or to pressure them or to make them do stuff. You should, everybody believes that a civilized country like the United States of America, who's basically the umbilical cord for Israel to do everything under the sun, can stand and say, this should not go on. This should not go on. Not just, we urge them not to harm them and so on. Because this is obviously systematic. I mean, when 150, I don't know how many, 150 journalists are killed and imprisoned and taken and so on, this is not just,
It doesn't sound like you have a follow-up question. So let me just jump in and say, from the president on down, we have reiterated that Israel it has a moral and strategic imperative to do more and to do everything it can to work on and bolster its deconfliction mechanisms, to take additional steps to protect civilians and minimize civilian casualties. And that, of course, includes and extends to journalists who we believe are doing important and vital work in the region.
A couple of things on Rafah. It has been assessed that it is impossible to evacuate Gazans from Rafah. There's about 1.4 million and so on. And it seems that, the United States is having meetings next week, or the administration will be having meetings with Ron Dermer and Hanigby to discuss Rafah. So if you are convinced, and that's what we get, at least, the suggestion is that it is really very difficult, it's impossible. Why cannot this be made, like the statement or the standard U.S. position? The standard U.S. position that Rafah should not be invaded.
Saeed, it is our position that such an operation should not and cannot be conducted without a credible and serious plan, a plan that needs to account for and address the varying humanitarian factors in the Rafah region. Firstly, the more than 1 million people seeking refuge in the area. Two, it continuing to be an area that is a conduit for humanitarian aid. It is out of serious concern for these two factors that we have not been unambiguous about our concerns as it relates to an operation in Rafah, and we'll continue to have these conversations with our Israeli partners.
So
Anything else?
After weeks, my last one, after weeks of this Rafah dilemma has been going on, is there a conceivable way to remove such a huge amount of people and move them safely, in your view or anybody's view?
when we're talking about dealing with the more than 1 million people who are seeking refuge in Rafah side, we're certainly not being prescriptive about how to go about and do that. And when it comes to the movement of the Palestinian people, especially those residing in Gaza, we've been very clear that the forcible movement or the forcible removal of them is certainly not something that we would support. But beyond that, I don't have, we're not aiming to be prescriptive here, Saeed. We're going to continue to have these conversations with our Israeli partners on what we believe can hopefully be a path forward that will help defeat Hamas, but also be mindful of these varying humanitarian factors. On Gaza, go ahead.
Thank you. So you said that you expect Israel to act in line with international law. And last month, you announced publicly that you are assessing whether or not Israel is complying with the international law, and you're also assessing the use of U.S. weapons in Israel's war. Have you come to any conclusion, and do you have any expectation of that? You know, how long it might take?
I don't have any updates. I don't have any updates to offer in that space. When we talk about that ongoing work, we're talking about it in the context of how this kind of work is ongoing in all conflict areas, where we're assessing the circumstances and anecdotes on the ground, and we're assessing what is happening. And of course, there are a number of vectors and a number of lines of efforts within the State Department to assess those kinds of things. We've talked about a couple of them from up here, processes like the Leahy processes like CHURG, and some of that work is just going to continue, and I don't have an update to offer on that.